Hello, Luminary. It is almost summer and it's time, as Lizzo says, to feel good as hell. We have our summer solstice with the sun entering Cancer. And on your self love journey, first comes Cancer's self acceptance. So let's dive in.
Welcome to Star Powered Astrology for Changemakers. I'm Leslie Tagorda, your guide, a Hawaii born Filipino Jewish astrologer who loves navigating visionaries like you through the spiritual journey of your work so that you can be inspired to lead by your chart and become the luminary leader you were born to be.
Hello, welcome back, Luminary. Oh my goodness, can you believe that we're almost at that cardinal direction of the solstice in the sky? If you're in the northern hemisphere, that means that the sun is rising at the northernmost point of the western horizon. And if you are in the southern hemisphere, the sun is rising at that southernmost point on the did I say on the western? I meant the eastern horizon. Oh my goodness, where is my head? Well, anyway, the solstice, we get two of them a year, once in July and once in December, signify the points of our longest and our shortest days. And it's part of our cardinal directions because as that sun reaches that kind of ultimate point, whether you're in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere, it signifies that midway point, marking the either the lengthening or the shortening of days. I'm going to be focusing on the northern hemisphere, otherwise, so we don't get ourselves confused. I live here in San Francisco in the northern hemisphere, not too far north of the equator, and so we don't get those massive shifts. So the farther away from the equator, the longer or shorter your days are. And I absolutely love this time of year for us in the northern hemisphere because the sun is out so late. It feels really hard to go to sleep at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. Well, I'm talking about getting my son to sleep. He definitely does not want to go to sleep when the sun is up. So before I get too off track in this episode, I want to talk a little bit about this solstice and what it means for us to be moving into Cancer season and how Cancer, yes, is about belonging. It's also about acceptance and self acceptance as part of our self care practice. And why am I talking about self care when you are here to learn about leadership and empowerment and really showing up and shining brightly? Well, as Lizzo teaches us, Lizzo is my spiritual teacher of the time right now. What Lizzo teaches us about self acceptance is that this is our first pathway into self confidence so that we can shine brightly. Okay, so you know already, if you've been listening to this podcast, that I'm absolutely obsessed with Lizzo. And you already know that I'm hosting a free masterclass on Lizzo. And so today's episode, Good as Hell, that title is inspired from one of her songs, how she is sharing with her listener how to get over a bad relationship and put her nails on, check her hair, and just feel good as hell. Of course, Good as Hell, her song title, is kind of an oxymoron, right? Because we don't normally think of hell as feeling as great. But in this term, it's really this soliloquy about like you're just feeling so fantastic and liberated and free and amazing and hot when you are in hell, right? So take that with a grain of salt. But the idea is to feel good as hell. It means to have that self confidence and that self love and to really not care what others think. And I just love this idea. And sometimes it's really hard to kind of put away all of those shoulds, especially if we're coming out of a bad relationship or maybe things at work aren't going so well for us and we're just kind of feeling beaten by that world. So, how do we get to this place of self confidence? Well, first, we need to stop at self acceptance. Now, of course, we are approaching Cancer season. And when I think about Cancer season, or when we think about Cancer, our typical ways of thinking about Cancer season are about like the divine feminine and mothering and self care and sensitivity and kindness. Yes, yes, yes. All of those things. But it's so much more than that. To me, when I think about Cancer, and I share it in depth on episode 91, is that Cancer is your power to create belonging. When I think of this idea, the archetype of the divine mother, I think of like this beautiful home, this place where she invites people to come sit at her kitchen table to enjoy a warm cup of tea, to enjoy a cup of soup, to hang your hat, and to share your stories. Now, the Divine Mother in this kind of like archetypal home story, she's not really doing all the talking, but she's opening up an invitation and inviting the person at her table to talk so that she can listen. Of course, the idea of the archetype of Cancer is much more of a listener. And so when we're thinking about this idea of Cancer in our businesses, we're thinking of the belonging that we create, the invitations, the places where we're creating that sense of emotional safety. Because of course, on that kitchen table, sipping your tea and having that bowl of soup, of course you're feeling welcomed and emotionally secure so that you can take that next step. Now, in your work with Cancer season and the Cancer archetype, your ability to help people feel emotionally secure, to feel all of your emotions, and to extend the invitation to create belonging to others is really important. Now, what about yourself? How do you create belonging for yourself? Now, personally, for me as an Aquarius, I've explored this idea of creating belonging for myself for a long time, simply just because I have never really felt like I've belonged anywhere. You might have heard me share my stories about being multiracial. And, even though my family loved me, I was always kind of code switching to try to fit in. And now that I'm older and more mature, how I've really cultivated a practice of creating belonging for myself, that no matter where I go, I belong. And that's a really, really, really hard practice. Okay. I don't have all of the answers for you in terms of like, how do we create that belonging? But what I do absolutely know is that number one is to create self acceptance to be able to get to that place of belonging. Now, for me, when I look at Cancer, I'm looking at Cancer from an archetype, especially as I'm working for my clients and really helping them validate their own star powers. What I often hear is when I'm working with clients, either I'm looking at their sun sign or their moon sign or their rising sign, there's a total disconnect from where they think that they should be versus where they are. And this idea of should be comes from a lot of these narratives that we hear outside of us. Maybe we've heard stories from our family that we should be a doctor or a lawyer, or that we've heard stories from the media that says in order to be a leader, you should have an Ivy degree or have all these different alphabet behind your name. Or in order to be an expert, you should have all of this experience. And so those shoulds are really, really, really heavy. But what I also know to be true is that not everyone gets the privilege of having an education or the time to study hard or the resources to be able to dive deep into something. And that does not mean that they are not an expert, especially when it comes to um, people that have a very strong Cancer, very strong Virgo, or all these energies that our culture doesn't seem to value. And so, where I'm getting with this is that when I'm working with my clients and I'm seeing a lot of struggle between their shoulds and what they really are, I love to bring into this awareness of their sun's superpowers that just radiate through and the needs of emotional security from our moon. I always come back to the sun and the moon. And when we can reframe people's superpowers, what they are here to do, and their expertise and their vibrancy and their just creative genius from their sun sign, it almost doesn't matter what credentials, what experience, what education, because ultimately the sun, your sun, is putting this filter on how you approach things and what your expertise is. And it's so beautiful to witness when I see my clients' hearts just light up in recognition and in validation of the things that they are so beautiful and good at. So, for example, if you have a Cancer sun, being validated that your superpower, that your value is really here to create safe spaces in order for healing to happen, that simply by listening and inviting and creating a place of belonging, that is your genius. Like, how validating is that? Or when somebody has Virgo and they want to bring in all of the pieces and they feel that the society has told them that they shouldn't be a jack of all trades, that that isn't good enough, that somebody has to like specify. Well, if you have a lot of mutable energy, like I do, Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, and Pisces, your job is actually to cast your net wide and synthesize so many things and then bring it in and distill so that you can connect the dots. And so, for a Virgo person who's feeling really overwhelmed with the narrative that they should specialize instead of like looking at how they're collecting a ton of data and synthesizing it and categorizing it and organizing it to make it something else, well, that's where the sun sign comes in to really show what one is here to be an expert in, and not necessarily because they have a degree in whatnot. I know I'm probably not making sense there. I feel like I'm going all over the place, but bear with me for a moment. And so when you are able to look at your natal chart from this place of the star powers that need to be amplified instead of the shoulds, when you are able to see your own expertise as something of value and reframing what we know to be of value instead of societal's narratives, then there's a sense of validation. And so, this idea of self acceptance really comes to seeing what you do as something that's absolutely brilliant, reframing any stories that keep you away because of the shoulds, and then, of course, validating that you are one of a kind, star powered, and that your expertise and brilliance matter. And so when I'm thinking of this Cancer season and coming back to solstice, this idea of using this Cancer season to bring us to self acceptance on our journey of self love and self confidence, we need to start with that self acceptance first. That idea of you are worthy, that you have pride in yourself. This idea that you have something that you are here to contribute, and that can you be grateful and see that place of worthiness and acceptance within you. Now, of course, coming back to self acceptance, now this doesn't always seem like this is something huge and valuable, but remember that once you accept yourself, all of your brilliance, all of your faults, your whole self, that we can then get to that next step of self confidence and creativity. But I want you to start to just reflect on the ways that you might be feeling that sense of not self acceptance, right? Because everything in this world is really positioned so that you have this fear, or to make you want to be somebody who you are not, right? Media, self judgment, your peers, your family, your society, maybe your culture. If you ever have this idea of a should conforming you into a one size fits all, you absolutely know that there's something working against your non self acceptance. But when we really harness this solstice, as well as our Cancer season for our self acceptance, then you get to celebrate your strengths because one, you know what your strengths are. You absolutely embrace your uniqueness and what makes you so special. Self acceptance also allows you to find the wisdom in your mistakes, right? Because we're not perfect. We're human beings, and mistakes are part of our journey. That when you know the wisdom of your mistakes, you can recognize those silver linings from all of your challenges, because what you have overcome and learned from your challenges really are your gifts that you're meant to contribute into the world. And from your mistakes, you also have control over certain things. You don't have control over everything. So, from your mistakes, you've learned what can be changed and what cannot be changed. And you've then had the power to be able to change the things that you can and leave the rest that you can't. So, from your mistakes, what you have learned, your silver linings, how now you have gained some empathy from others who have might have experienced those same challenges, some empathy and compassion for yourself as well as others, and then possibly even found a new solution, awakened to something else that was outside of the status quo. You wouldn't have found any of those things if you did not make those quote unquote mistakes and learned the wisdom from those challenges. Now, also, when you come to this place of Cancerian self acceptance, you really have this deep self forgiveness and compassion for yourself. You see your tears and your feelings as these, like, kind of like purification, knowing that something has really touched your heart. You recognize that yourself and no one else is perfect and that you are absolutely whole. We thank ourselves and we forgive ourselves and we give ourselves this compassion when we have true self acceptance. Now, when you have that sense of self compassion and self forgiveness, you hear yourself out without judgment or criticism. Now, sometimes that's really hard, right? Because we're always judging and criticizing ourselves. That's part of our process. But instead of allowing the judgment or the criticism to take hold, we can simply ask that, get curious with the judgment and criticism about what it wants us to do better or to change, right? Because some things we can't change. And then we have that choice of, do we just leave what we can't change or do we find a different path? Now, there's a couple of books that I would love if this is for you and you have a really hard time with self forgiveness and compassion. As I was kind of like doing research for this little podcast for self forgiveness and compassion, I came across two of my favorite books. I'm like, no wonder. I've been working so hard for myself and my inner journey of self acceptance, that there's Brene Brown's The Gift of Imperfection. Let go of who you think you're supposed to be and embrace who you are. Yes, like, thank you, Brene. Embrace who you are. Of course, your star powers, your natal chart can show you the blueprint of who you are. And then also Tara Brach's Radical Acceptance. How do we love ourselves and accept ourselves for who I am? So I offer a little mantra for you, and then we're going to go into some solstice reflections. So, a little mantra for you for this Cancer solstice season: I accept who I am. I love who I am. My strengths and my differences are my greatest gifts. Hmm. It's this month of Cancer season that is going to be moving us into Leo's confidence, courage, so that you can shine brightly. So, as we pause on this kind of tick into Cancer season, like I said tick because I'm like envisioning this clock that is striking noon, where we're moving into out of Gemini season into Cancer season. We found our message, we found what we need to express ourselves, and then Cancer season is giving us the self acceptance in order to be able to feel safe enough to express our needs, right? I just love how Gemini season moves into Cancer season and Cancer season then moves us into that Leo confidence. But before we move into that, let's do some solstice reflections because there are some reflections that can get us closer to that idea of self acceptance. In the solstice reflections that, humans have been doing for millennia, as at least in the northern hemisphere, when we have that longest day, the light has been gradually amping up and up and up and up so that we have longer and longer and longer days till we get to the solstice where the sun appears to stand still. Just like in the December solstice, our July solstice is a time of reflection because we can look back and be grateful for everything that has changed over, the last 6 months since the last solstice in December, or even in the last year. And I'll talk a little bit about that. We'll also have solstice reflections around acceptance. What do we need to accept and love about ourselves and care for and cultivate and nurture for ourselves, just like a divine mother or an ancestor would love all of our parts, right? Unconditionally with wholeness. Now, some of these solstice reflection questions are based from looking at last year's summer solstice to this year's summer solstice. So a 12-month solstice kind of return. Our summer solstice happens for us on Wednesday, June 21st at 7:58 a.m. Pacific, 7 8 9 10 10:58 a.m. Eastern. So that morning when you wake up, when the sun is rising, when you see the sun up in the sky, just thank the sun for shining again and showering with us with all of its vitality and brightness. And so the similarity, so this year's summer solstice, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself again. There's just so much to share. There's a couple of interesting things about this summer solstice. And if you've been feeling a little bit prickly or a little bit under the weather, under the cosmic weather, so to say, well, there's a couple of things that might be adding to that. First of all, we have the Cancer sun that is making an inconjunct to Pluto, meaning that there might be some power plays that where you've been giving away your power or hoarding power over others. So feel into that where there might be a power imbalance. And then there's another quintile that is happening with Chiron. And to me, this Chiron quintile feels so beautiful because, Chiron, the wounded healer, Chiron shares with us, informs with us the most deepest core wounds that we have to overcome. That through that overcoming of our core wounds is what we are meant to contribute back into the world through our offers, through our work. And so it's so beautiful that this quintile, this sun quintile with Chiron, means that when we can accept our core wounds, this brings us onto the path, positive path of our brilliance and shining brightly. So I want you to reflect on that. The other thing that I want you to reflect on is that from last year's solstice in 2022, we had our north node, everybody's north node, transiting north node at 21 degrees of Taurus. That's last year. And this year, Uranus, the planet of change and awakening, is now sitting at that 21 degrees of Taurus. And so, one of the reflection questions as we come to our practice and reflection and gratitude of self acceptance is to really recognize what has awakened for you in the last 12 months. All the trials and all the tribulations, all the ups and downs, you've made it. You've made change. You've made it onto your highest path. There's been something that has awakened in you that has been part of your soul's potential. Really reflect on that through all the trials, the challenges, and the ups and the downs. What change have you truly made over the last 12 months? That's really what's showing up for this solstice reflections, for which you can give gratitude, because the more gratitude that you can have in something, this is where prosperity comes from. You can't have prosperity and abundance without gratitude and acceptance. You can't have self love without self-acceptance. So, a couple of reflection questions for you based on the astrology over the last 12 months. I want you to take a look at what has awakened in you, right? What has changed since last year, right? What have you just been so grateful that you have awakened in yourself since last year? There has to have been something that has put you on your highest path. So, reflection question number one: what is something that has awakened and changed in you since the last year? And the flip side of that, what's one thing that you still need to improve upon and change? Second reflection question: what are you good at? Right? Just list all of the things that you're good at. Even if it might be like the most mundane thing, like I'm good at cooking, I'm good at cleaning, I'm good at organizing things. Maybe that doesn't seem so glorious, but I absolutely love those things. The simpler, the better. On the flip side of that, because we're talking about wholeness and self acceptance, there's no good without the places that you could improve. What do you still need to improve? What could you improve about yourself? Okay, third question: the best thing that you love about yourself. What is one thing that you love about yourself? It could be about your body, it could be about your looks, it could be about your talents, it could be about your emotions, it could be about the people that you surround yourself. What's one thing that you love about yourself? For me, I love my family. Even though I'm super challenged by my closest relationships, I love that I'm surrounded by amazing people. I love my friends. I love my family. I love my community. I love you. I love my listeners. So I love the people that surround me. And what's one thing that you'd like to change about yourself? For me, at least, I'd still like to not be so hungry. I feel like the hungry ghost is taking over. I've been gaining a little bit of weight lately, and I really would like to not be so hungry. We're just talking about acceptance here. Okay, now some reflections. Last, two more questions. What do other people tell you you're great at? Now, this is going to be super helpful if you're really finding some challenges about finding within yourself what you're good at or what you love about yourself. What do other people tell you you're great at? Because sometimes they can see you in a more clear light than we can see ourselves, right? Other people tell me that I'm great at reflecting on their questions. Sometimes it's hard for me to get succinct, but other people tell me that I'm great at making things succinct for them. What do other people say that you need to improve upon? We all need to improve upon something. Again, this is a practice of wholeness. Just because somebody tells us we need to improve upon something doesn't mean that we're bad or terrible at it. I know that I need to be improve on not taking on so many things and saying no so that I can do a really good job at the tasks at hand. Okay. And last question for your solstice reflections. What's one amazing thing that you've accomplished in the last 12 years? Similar to that first opening question of what have you changed about yourself last year? What is one amazing thing that you've accomplished? And the flip side of that, because we're focusing on self acceptance and wholeness, what's one mistake you've made in the last year? Okay, so I hope you spend some time with these solstice reflection questions. It's the perfect time of year to bring gratitude and acceptance and create that sense of self validation for yourself and to recognize all of the change that you've already created in the last 12 months. Self acceptance is freedom from your suffering. Give yourself the full unconditional validation and permission to be you, to be good as hell. Now, if you want to tap into your own star powers with me, and we're going to be looking at Lizzo's natal chart and connecting the dots on how she accesses her own creative juice, her creative style, and her creative process. This is your last chance to join me live in a Lizzo masterclass about damn time that's happening on the solstice. We'll be doing some solstice reflections for self-acceptance so that we can get to the heart of our confident star power, as Lizzo is absolutely a role model for all of us. So I'll be doing a masterclass. We'll be doing a deep dive case study of Lizzo's natal chart, focusing on her, what she does so well and how she does it so well, focusing in on her creative process. Then I'll be offering how you can connect the dots to your own creative process with self-acceptance and self-awareness. And then I'll be inviting you into Star Powered Style in Q3. So if you want to join for this free masterclass and learn all about Lizzo's chart and how to connect the stars and the dots in your own natal chart for your creative juice, head on over to starpowered.com/Lizzo. The masterclass will be recorded, but if you show up live, you'll be able to get your questions answered and be part of the rebroadcast. I'll be sharing that masterclass also here repurposed in this podcast. So don't worry if you missed the masterclass, but please do join us. It's your last chance to sign up live. Masterclass is on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific on solstice, June 21st. So head on over to starpowered.com/Lizzo and sign up for my free brand new masterclass. It's about damn time. All right, my friends, I hope that you were able to follow me. My brain has been a little bit all over the place, but I hope you got to the gist that self-acceptance is at the heart of your self-confidence and self-love. All right, my friends, till next time.
As a human design projector, my energy shines more brightly because of people like you who share my work. If you enjoy this podcast and want to help build a movement of innovative astrology and leadership and spark the intuitive revolution, please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, or better yet, share this podcast with your change-making besties. We will all shine brighter together as we create the future we want to see.